Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Indaba Africa. This is Chris. Today is Sunday, May 24th, 2020. Talk to you this evening about the recent speech by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, in which he addressed the nation and discussed South Africa moving from level 4 to level 3 on the COVID-19 lockdown. In the midst of the Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19 crisis pandemic, South Africa will now be moving on June 1st from level 4 to level 3 around the country. However, President Ramaphosa's remarks raised as many questions as answers he gave. So let's talk a little bit about what came out of Ramaphosa's comments earlier this evening on South African television. Well, for those who missed their drink, good news for you. As of June 1st, you will once again be able to purchase alcohol, however, only for consumption at home and only during limited hours of operation. Tobacco, if you're looking for your smokes, I'm sorry, but you will not be able to enjoy your lawfully obtained cigarettes because the cigarette ban restriction remains in place. Retail stores will be open once again. Those who managed to survive the draconian lockdown in South Africa will be allowed to resume normal operating hours on June 1st. And South Africans can now finally escape their homes. They're no longer prisoners. You will be allowed to exercise any time of day, 24 hours a day, at your leisure, and you won't be crammed into a narrow 3-hour window exercising with thousands of other people around you. That's good news for folks. Gatherings of up to 50 persons will be permitted. However, organized sporting events are prohibited. No sports, but gatherings up to 50 people. People will be able to move freely about the country once again, and people will be allowed to return to work and to school. But now the confusing things. Alcohol, yes, but limited hours. So once again, the National Coronavirus Command Council is issuing dictates, and the president telling South Africans about these dictates in which they are allowing something but creating more confusion. Only letting businesses open for a restricted number of hours is not really going to accomplish their goal at limiting the spread of the virus. Instead, you will see thousands of people crammed into queues, likely not obeying social distancing, and getting tired of standing in long queues so they can purchase alcohol. That's not going to help the situation. Allow these stores to go back to their normal operating hours, and that will have a better effect on reducing the spread of the virus. No tobacco. Well, in the meantime, illicit tobacco trade goes unabated, unchecked, and the state loses hundreds of millions, if not billions of rands in tax revenue from the sale of illicit cigarettes. In the meantime, we've heard of no undercover operations that have unveiled or disclosed this illicit trade and arrested those involved or even confiscated illegal cigarettes, many of which the origin is questionable and the safety of smoking them is questionable, as well as the loss of revenue. So the tobacco ban remaining in place does nothing to improve health in South Africa. Quite the contrary. It only helps criminal syndicates and perhaps maybe someone who's getting money from them. Gatherings up to 50 people, that will make a great difference in South Africans being able to once again have a braai with their neighbors or to visit family and friends. That will be great and a nice improvement. The ban on sporting events is probably a prudent decision, one that I can support at a reasonable level. I understand it, but how far does it go? If you want to go fishing, angling is a sport. Does that mean you're violating the curfew? If you're in a fishing competition, if you're violating the rules, yet to see. The free movement of people, yes and no. People can move freely about the country with the exception of certain locations in metropolitan areas, which the president has identified some of those, including, of course, Cape Town, the Cape Winelands area, and Nelson Mandela Bay, among others. In those locations, you'll have to have a permit to travel outside the local area. That was a bit vague, but we'll find out more, I suppose, from the government in the coming days. Well, President Ramaphosa says that 8 million people can go back to work. Of course, that assumes that there's jobs for those 8 million people. In many cases, small and medium enterprises have gone under, particularly those owned by minority business owners who were denied assistance from the government on racial basis in a shameful display of racism taking place by government. Public transportation will be available once again. However, the president has said that commuters must wear masks, wash their hands before and after using public transport, which is good advice, and that they must maintain their social distancing. Now, that should be an interesting spectacle to see for those of you familiar with the main form of transportation for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of South Africans getting from one place to another for short distances. That's usually what we'll call a combi or a Volkswagen minibus. And in there, you can normally carry 9 passengers under normal conditions. Well, we've often seen these things stuffed full of 13 or more passengers. And can't you imagine, how do you possibly maintain social distance in a vehicle like that? You couldn't possibly have more than 4 passengers at absolutely the most, which would make transporting people inefficient and not profitable for many of the copy drivers. So we'll see what happens with public transportation, including buses and trains, and of course commercial aviation, of which the president spoke nothing about. Domestic aviation. South Africa's 2 major carriers with its 2 subsidiaries, that would be South African Airways and its subsidiary of Mango Airlines, are in business rescue, or as we say in the States, bankruptcy, Chapter 11 reorganization. The other commercial carrier, Comair, which is the British Airways affiliate in South Africa, and it's also the owner of Kululu, which is a discount airline, is also in business rescue. So if commercial aviation is able to resume, will these companies be able to get back to business? Do they have the resources, funds, and even personnel to resume flights? The president did not talk about that in his speech. South Africa's borders will remain closed to all foreign nationals. The exception being South African citizens can be repatriated to South Africa, but of course he didn't mention this. One would suspect they would have to go into quarantine, as Botswana and Namibia have done next door, keeping their borders closed to all but their own citizens and then quarantining them after arrival. Schools will reopen, but once again, in yet another confusing statement by the president, 2 things come into play. Schools will reopen from June 1st, but only grades 7 and 12. The president also said that there'll be an effort to get students back on track so that this academic year finishes and people can advance. Well, that's going to be a little bit hard to do in public schools when only grade 7 and grade 12 are returning to school. What about the other 10 grades, President? And finally, when it comes to schools, the president said that universities will be open, but that only 1/3 of students will be allowed to return to classrooms. Which third? Who decides who these third are? That guidance was very unclear. And again, the president has left us scratching our head as to what exactly he means and what the intent is here. Now listen, folks, I don't mean to throw shade all over Cyril Ramaphosa, who's in a very difficult situation, or the ruling African National Congress with this video. My point here is to say that while many people may be excited that the lockdown level is being lowered to 3 in South Africa, the draconian restrictions placed on the liberties, freedoms, and economic opportunity for millions, tens of millions of South Africans are still in jeopardy and at risk every day by the ruling African National Congress for arbitrary decisions made by a council answerable to no democratic institution, the National Coronavirus Command Council. And that is my point here with this video, ladies and gentlemen. These arbitrary decisions have destroyed lives. Many people are in despair, social isolation. Now, some of that will be relieved by people being able to get up and move about, but also politics is being played here. The president has pointed out that they would keep those metropolitan areas that they're gravely concerned about. And he particularly pointed out not just metropolitan areas, but the entire Western Province region, talking about the higher number of cases there. Well, I submit, ladies and gentlemen, that the reason that there are more cases in places like Cape Town is that the local governments are doing more testing of South Africans. And on that line, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa mentioned that over 500,000 tests have been conducted in South Africa now, 580,000, 570,000, something like that. Well, that is less than 1% of the population of South Africa. And on the basis of that, they've decided to loosen the lockdown restrictions. While I agree with loosening the lockdown restrictions, it doesn't quite match up with the logic that they're putting in place. The president has also explicitly stated that the Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19 situation will get worse, will get much worse in South Africa, and threatened that the country could return to level 4 or level 5. Isn't that a fait accompli? You've just told us it's going to get worse. So what is the threshold? What are the guidelines for you raising the lockdown back to level 4 or level 5? And why can people in South Africa who smoke not be permitted to purchase legal cigarettes and that be taxed by the government to raise revenue, to help the needy, to help the hungry, and to ensure that the South African Treasury actually has revenue coming into it from other things? Ladies and gentlemen, the lockdown has been eased in South Africa after neighboring Namibia did it a week ago, and now in the past few days, Botswana has done the same thing. Botswana and Namibia have far more rational decisions behind and far more logic behind the decision to ease the lockdown and maintain restrictions on their citizens. This has been a production of the Indaba Africa Group. I'm Chris. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe to this channel by smashing that little like button or subscription button right down there. Be sure to toggle the notification button so you get updated about my live stream, prepared videos. And also, I ask that you give a like to this video if you found it thought-provoking, interesting, or if you enjoyed it at all. Hang in there, South Africa. You're going to get through this. We're all going to manage despite governance challenges.